Tonight, another damning image of Justin Trudeau, another apology.
But will Canadians accept?
This is something that I deeply, deeply regret.
It's kind of disrespectful.
I've done stupid things 20 years ago, so.
We hear from voters in key battlegrounds, the other leaders.
It's for Canadians to forgive him if they choose to or not.
And people who were there. Rosemary and Adish break it all down.
Also tonight, parents who treated their son's illness with natural remedies found not guilty in his death.
Canadian doctors call for a crackdown on vaping.
I'm certainly not the retiring kind.
And why so many seniors are skipping retirement to work longer. This is The National.
Tonight, as Justin Trudeau faces the biggest challenge of his political career, he's in Saskatoon, face to face with Canadians, taking questions from voters and apologizing, again, for old photos where he appeared in brown and blackface.
What I did was inexcusable and wrong and hurt a lot of people who considered me to be an ally. And that is wrong. And I am deeply, deeply sorry.
This was supposed to be a campaign rally. Now it's a town hall, a chance for Trudeau to continue a day of remorse and self-reproach. So Rose is here as we dig into a dramatic 24 hours in Canadian politics and the now several instances where Trudeau darkened his skin.
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. Today, for the first time, Trudeau used the term blackface, which is what the new images show, and he acknowledged that he had not told anyone about them because he was embarrassed. David Cochran takes us through day 2 for a party leader under fire.
These pictures would lead you to believe it was a normal day on the campaign trail. These pictures made sure it was not. Justin Trudeau threw out the schedule to beg forgiveness in a public park.
What I did, the choices I made, hurt people who thought I was an ally.
Before all this, Trudeau held a conference call with candidates where he apologized and expressed regret. Several rallied to his defense.
It was wrong then, it's wrong now. But I'm also here to talk about the person who I know in terms of how much he has standing up for people.
I think that we need to be talking about, and I hope that you'll be talking about, are all the amazing things which we've done for diversity.
That's the line. Judge Trudeau by who he is now, not by what he did as a high school teacher or even earlier as a high school student.
The fact is, I didn't understand how hurtful this is to people who live with discrimination every single day. I have always acknowledged that I come from a place of privilege, but I now need to acknowledge that that comes with a massive blind spot.
But even now, there's still a blind spot. When asked repeatedly if this was the extent of the scandal, Trudeau couldn't answer.
I am wary of being definitive about this because the recent pictures that came out, I had not remembered.
After the damage control in Winnipeg, Trudeau flew here to Saskatoon for a town hall. It's clear this picture collage of scandal has wounded Trudeau deeply. He lost a day of campaigning in Winnipeg, and it threatens the campaign days ahead. David Cochran, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Trudeau's troubles could be an opportunity for his opponents. Katie Simpson shows us how Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is using the controversy and also how he isn't.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is trying to walk a careful line, to seize the opportunity and condemn Justin Trudeau while standing by his own second chances policy.
Canadians might have been able to accept his apology if he had been truthful and open.
The Conservatives leaked the new video of Trudeau in blackface to Global News, introducing Canadians to a third incident after the Liberal leader said he'd only done it twice.
Concerned individual who did see this video did bring it to our campaign, and our campaign turned it over to a responsible news outlet for verification.
Scheer would not say when his team obtained the clip or how long they'd known about its existence. The past 24 hours have shifted focus away from Conservative candidates that Scheer has personally defended for past homophobic, racist, or controversial comments.
If anything that they've ever said in the past caused any type of hurt or disrespect to one community or another, and have apologized for that, I accept that.
Given his attack on Trudeau today, Scheer was again asked if he should apologize for his pointed anti-same-sex marriage speech from 2005. He declined.
What we're talking about today is Justin Trudeau's behavior.
Scheer is not calling on Trudeau to resign, and in a speech tonight to supporters, he didn't mention the blackface issue once, instead choosing to focus on his main economic message. Katie Simpson, CBC News, on board the Conservative campaign plane in Sherbrooke, Quebec.
As a Sikh and person of color, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has been able to address all of this on a much more personal level. Hannah Thibodeau shows us how that played out today.
What perfect timing to have Jagmeet Singh.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh appeared on radio and TV and held a roundtable on help for small businesses.
You'd love to have that coverage.
But most questions focused on those images of Liberal leader Justin Trudeau in black and brown face.
Do you think he's racist?
I think that's a question Canadians are going to have to answer. I can tell you that I am deeply troubled by what this means to Canada. That young kids are going to see not just one or two, but multiple images of the Prime Minister mocking their lived reality.
So Singh says Trudeau can't simply write this off as one mistake from years ago.
Well, once something becomes a pattern, it's no longer isolated. It becomes proof of something that is real. It's not for me to forgive, it's for Canadians to forgive him.
Trudeau says he's spoken with many people to apologize for what he did, but he hasn't reached out to Singh, who's the first non-white leader of a federal political party. Last night, Singh seemed shaken by what he had seen and how it affected people, including himself.
When I was growing up, I fought racists. There's a lot of people out there that couldn't do that. They couldn't fight back. They didn't have the ability to do that. They couldn't do it themselves. And I think that it's going to hurt to see this. It's going to hurt them a lot.
Singh says he doesn't know how he'll look Trudeau right in the eye, but he is willing to meet face-to-face with him to tell him why what he did was wrong. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Windsor, Ontario.
So how might the fallout from all of this unfold, and how much damage could it actually do? Just two of the political questions we will address later tonight.
Darkening your face, regardless of the context or the circumstances, is always unacceptable.
So a second apology from Trudeau. Today, the language was starker, the emotions closer to the surface, and the explanations more complete, but not entirely, given he didn't confirm if there are other photos out there. So did he do enough to limit the damage to his brand? Has he lost the support of the very Canadians he was trying to court? On day 9 of the campaign, can he recover and move past it?
I can tell you that it hurts.
And what about his opponents? Does this allow Canada's first visible minority leader to make his mark? And can the Conservatives shake off their own problems in order to take advantage of a political opportunity? All those questions and more coming up in a double at issue with Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine. We'll have that in about 20 minutes' time. Until then, back to Andrew with new details about one of those photos.
Yeah, Rosie, those details come from one of the men in the picture, in the glasses, standing beside Justin Trudeau at the Arabian Nights Gala. Today, Sonny Kurana spoke to the CBC's Tanya Fletcher.
You know, it was a fun night, and people were all dressed up in their own, like a lot of people were dressed up in costumes.
Costumes including Justin Trudeau dressed up as Aladdin. Sonny Kurana posed for this photo with him that night in 2001. He says Trudeau's appearance fit the context of the Arabian Nights themed gala.
I don't even recall anybody saying anything negative about it. I don't think the intention was to hurt anybody. Hello?
18 years later, Kurana runs a sari shop in Surrey. He recalls people dressed up in all kinds of cultural outfits that night. He says no one seemed to have a problem with Trudeau's appearance.
So you weren't offended at all that night?
No, not that night at all. Not at all.
And what about now?
No.
Others who were also at the gala say it's hard to forget Trudeau's over-the-top costume.
It seemed like an awful lot of effort to go to, and it was probably more than anyone else had. But then that was Justin, wasn't it?
In 2001, Roger Husband's two sons were also students at West Point Grey Academy. He says it was a very multicultural and politically correct school.
As far as anybody finding it racist or objectionable in any way, if the school had thought this, they would have stopped it.
And that's echoed by another parent who was there that night.
The idea of the political correctness of him putting brown face on didn't even enter into it when we were at a school that probably at least half the kids were people of color.
As for Karana, a person of color himself, he says the focus should be on the policies of the future, not the pictures of the past. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Surrey.
Now, one way or another, those photos from the past and the reactions from the present will get resolved in the very near future in the voting booth. Take, for example, the riding of Erin Mills, Mississauga, in the Toronto area. It swung to the Liberals last election, but Conservatives are very keen to swing it back. Tashana Reid found people there weighing the Trudeau revelations and deciding what it means for their vote.
In this key riding, it wasn't hard to find opinions about the Prime Minister wearing blackface.
Honestly, to me, it's kind of disrespectful. I feel like some people think it's okay, some people have their own opinions, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's okay, and that's how I feel personally.
But reactions were all over the map.
Okay, when did he do that? Okay, that was like 20 years ago? Yeah, okay. He was obviously young. I was young once. I've done stupid things 20 years ago.
I think maybe he just did a stupid thing. You know, about us. 2001, I mean, blackface, a brown face, not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
Well, I think it was really dumb. But I don't think the guy's racist.
If he's doing it just because of the race, then it is a problem. But if the intent, now whether the Prime Minister had the intent or not, that is very important, and that you have to ask him.
How Trudeau answers may have an impact on how voters vote.
I don't think it's going to change my political opinion of him just because of those pictures. It was different age. I'm sure he's evolved, he's learned. That's what he's admitting to it. We're used to this, I guess.
What happened 18 years ago does not take away from the past 4 years.
As MP Ikra Khalid campaigns, she knows she will have to answer at the door of her constituents about the actions of her party leader.
I think that this is an excellent way that we can continue to engage in the conversation about racism and what it means to Canadians, and how we can use this experience to develop more stronger policies around education and awareness.
This is just one key riding, just one snapshot of how some Canadian voters are feeling. Tashana Reid, Mississauga, Ontario.
Now, for the Liberals, keeping a hold on Quebec is also critical. And this is a province that continues to drive debates nationwide around race and culture. Alison Northcott has been tracking some of the reaction to the Trudeau images there.
This is Justin Trudeau's own riding of Papineau. Lydie Gisèle Guébidiang says she's always voted Liberal, and the photos of Trudeau in blackface won't change that. It's not a problem, she says. I don't think it will hurt his chances of being re-elected.
It's not right.
But Vishwadeep Karavla says the photos don't sit well with him.
Will it impact the way you vote?
Yes.
It will.
I mean, it's not just this incident.
Former Parti Québécois cabinet minister Bernard Drainville authored the controversial Quebec Charter of Values. Now a radio host, he says the story is seen differently in English and French media, and says callers to his show say it's not a big deal.
In the rest of Canada, it's a really, really big deal. In Quebec, it's not really an issue. They don't really see that this is an issue of racism, or this is an issue, this is a lack of respect for minorities.
Today, some Quebec politicians, even Trudeau's adversaries, cut him some slack.
We can be against him on many issues. This is my case, but he's not a racist.
Mr. Trudeau said that he was sorry, so I think we have to talk about something else.
The Black Coalition of Quebec said Trudeau didn't need to apologize for what it said is essentially a tempest in a teapot. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Now, it goes without saying, for many Canadians, this is more than just a political story. It's a complicated one that strikes to the very core of who we are as Canadians. So tomorrow night, right here on The National, we're going to have that conversation.
Let's go to some other news now, and a verdict in an Alberta case that caught the attention of Canadians everywhere. A couple has been found not guilty in the 2012 death of their toddler son. David and Colette Stephan were charged after treating the child with natural remedies instead of seeking medical help. Carolyn Dunn has the details.
David and Colette Stephan have waited a long time for this day.
It's been 7 years of our life
fighting this, and so it's become a part of our identity. And it's just a beautiful thought that we can move on with our lives. Mourn the loss of Ezekiel appropriately.
19-month-old Ezekiel Stephan died in March 2012. He'd been ill for more than 2 weeks with symptoms of meningitis. The Stephans treated him with a host of natural remedies from horseradish to echinacea, but they didn't seek medical help or call an ambulance until he stopped breathing. After a stop at one ill-equipped hospital, Ezekiel had been without oxygen for more than 9 minutes. His official cause of death was bacterial meningitis. The Stephans were charged and convicted of failing to provide the necessaries of life. But last year, the Supreme Court of Canada quashed the convictions and ordered a retrial. In today's judgment, Justice Terry Claxon wrote the Crown did not prove its case. It follows that the Crown did not prove medical attention would have saved Ezekiel's life, or that if he had viral meningitis and it was life-threatening, medical attention even could have saved his life.
So at the last trial, I was expecting an acquittal and we didn't get one. And it just feels like a weight is off our shoulders right now.
In a statement, the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service says it respects the court's decision in a case it calls challenging for everyone involved. It says it intends to review today's decision and then determine next steps. David Stephan, who represented himself in court, is relieved, but now must wait to see if Crown prosecutors will appeal. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
More news ahead on The National, including at issue on what is next for Justin Trudeau. Plus, Canadian doctors say it is time to treat vaping like smoking. Their call for a crackdown.
And later, why more Canadians are delaying retirement and working well past 65.
And the results of a CBC News investigation. What was making Canadian diplomats sick in Cuba? It may not have been a sonic attack. See you in 2 minutes.
One day after Canada's first confirmed vaping-related illness, and with the number of cases in the U.S. skyrocketing, today a coalition of Canadian health groups is demanding Ottawa take urgent action on e-cigarettes. The Canadian Lung Association, Heart and Stroke, and the Cancer Society are among them. And as Christine Birak reports, they are sounding that alarm loud and clear.
Doctors say they've seen enough. It's time to treat vaping like smoking.
Blue e-cigs.
Ban the ads, get rid of flavors, limit nicotine levels, and slap on the health warnings.
Youth vaping has become a public health crisis, and we need action now.
With 1 in 5 high school-age kids admitting they use vape products, medical groups are demanding all party leaders commit to tightening the rules around vaping within 60 days of forming a government.
It's a step, for sure, but I think we have to take way bigger steps to because kids are going to do it anyways.
My boyfriend's actually sick. I think it's from vaping.
Right now, federal law allows for advertising of e-cigarettes or vaping products on TV, radio, online, and pretty much everywhere else.
If I can go back to the 60s, the way they used to sell cigarettes.
But given all that's online, marketing expert Marvin Ryder isn't convinced a ban would stop all the ads.
I don't think we do have a great way to patrol across boundaries, across jurisdictions.
Compared to smoking, the health warnings on vape products are invisible, and Canada's maximum nicotine content is more than 3 times the European limit. And it's not clear what chemicals are in those pods, which is why investigators haven't been able to figure out what's killed at least 7 Americans. And new numbers show cases have jumped from 380 lung illnesses to 530 this week.
It's very difficult to trace which exact contaminant is causing this because of the lack of regulation around what's in these cartridges.
I personally started vaping to quit cigarettes, which I was successful at. But looking at the news, I'm reconsidering it, yeah.
Health Canada says it's listening, and while no link has been made between any specific vaping product or ingredient and severe lung illnesses, it's reviewing the role that flavors, nicotine, and product design play in attracting children. Christine Virak, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, let's get to Ian now. We're in a national newsroom in Vancouver. He's watching Developing Stories.
And Andrew, we're going to start with new details behind the so-called Havana syndrome, that mysterious ailment that affected dozens of Canadian and American diplomats stationed in Cuba. A new Canadian study suggests chemicals from fumigation, not sonic attacks, might have caused the illness. Some 40 diplomats and their families experienced concussion-like symptoms starting in 2016, some hearing what they called a buzzing or high-pitched sound before falling sick. Officials worried it was some sort of intentional sonic attack, but this new analysis found the illnesses coincided with increased fumigation at the time due to the Zika epidemic. It's still not clear whether the man accused of killing 2 police officers and 2 civilians in Fredericton last year is fit to stand trial. That will now be up to a jury to decide. Matthew Raymond is facing 4 counts of first-degree murder for the shooting deaths of Constables Sarah Burns and Rob Costello and Donnie Robichaud and Bobby Lee Wright last August. The hearing into his fitness to stand trial will assess Raymond's current mental state, but not when the shootings took place. And Toronto's Transit Authority has reached a settlement with a black man who sued the agency after he was forcibly detained by fare inspectors last year.
I apologize for the embarrassment and humiliation that was caused by the TTC.
And the TTC says they expressed those sentiments in a conversation with Reese Maxwell Crawford yesterday. The apology in response to this incident captured on video in February of 2018. Maxwell Crawford, who was 19 at the time, pinned to the ground by 3 TTC workers but never charged with anything. Details of the settlement were not released. Now, near Houston, Texas tonight, catastrophic flooding has turned deadly, and that's one of the stories we'll be looking at in 20 minutes.
And we will be right back with At Issue. Justin Trudeau apologized again today. Was it enough? And what does it mean for Trudeau, the brand? Rosie's next with Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine.
And a historic moment at Canada's National Ballet School. You will hear from the boys of the class of 2020.
darkening your face, regardless of the context or the circumstances, is always unacceptable because of the racist history of blackface. I should have understood that then, and I never should have done it.
Justin Trudeau apologized again today for his past behavior, but was this enough for Canadians? And what does it all mean for his political future, for the campaign? We've brought everyone in for At Issue tonight. Chantal Hébert is here, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, and my podcast pal, who I'm now forcing on television, Party Lines co-host Elamine Abdelmahmoud. It happens to everyone eventually. Welcome,
yes.
Elamine.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad you're all here. I'm glad we actually made it work, that we're all in person today, because there's a lot to talk about. Let's start with the second attempt at an apology today. Althea, how do you think the Prime Minister did today?
Pretty good, actually. We haven't seen Justin Trudeau seem like he means that he's sorry on a number of fronts. Like I think about the Aga Khan, for example, the sort of like I accept the Ethics Commissioner's report with regards to SNC-Lavalin, but I disagree. And here you really did feel like he is truly sorry for what he has done. And even that he's reflected overnight on perhaps what he should have said last night. And that he feels he needs to go further. And it's not just that this is like very politically damaging possibly to him, but this goes to the fiber of who people think he is, and for that he needs to explain.
And is he trying to fight here the notion that his brand has been tainted by racist behavior, or is it more that they think he's hypocritical? Chantal? Or both?
Oh, that's quite a choice getting up in the morning. I think he's trying to salvage his brand, damaged brand as it is, and that is basically where it goes. I agree that the second day apology was better executed than the first day apology, but I think it's not just that he feels it, and I'm not saying I doubt that he feels it, but survival requires it. And their first step in damage control has succeeded in as much as no candidate is left in disgust.
Yes, that's true.
And I think they were worried enough about that they spent a lot of energy on that. Where it goes from here, it's just an impression, but I think on the basis of what I saw today, there's still an audience out there for his apology/explanations.
What do you think, Edward?
I agree that hypocrisy and foolishness and fraudulence are the more damaging things to the brand, all of this which speaks to this. He absolutely, at a bare minimum, had to have an absolutely contrite apology, because otherwise the racist thing would stick to him.
Right.
But the contrition that was sufficient, I think, for most people to say, okay, that was a racist thing he did. He was extremely stupid to have ever gone near that. I don't buy the idea that somebody 29 years old in 2001 would not have known that this was off, way off the charts. But I think what is more damaging to him, because it plays into existing perceptions of him, is the idea that he's not what he seems to be, that he's all show and no substance, that he's not particularly truthful. I do think he didn't start very well in that press conference today when he wouldn't answer the question about how many other videos or photos were out there, how many other incidents there had been, but he got a lot better once he, I think, decided he was cornered on that and had to answer that question. And from then on, I think he was much better.
And he also explained, Elamine, that the reason he hadn't told anyone about these pictures, because that was something you and I were talking about on the podcast, was why didn't he tell someone, was because he was embarrassed.
Yes.
Now, I guess we have to take him at his word that that's what was motivating him. But what did you make of the way he approached it today versus even last night?
It's like the least of my expectations that you would be embarrassed about something like this. Of course you'd be embarrassed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've built a brand around being this person who wants to have those conversations about race, wants to have those conversations about all these issues that everyone else keeps running away from, built a brand, frankly, around being a little bit sanctimonious. I mean, like, it's okay to be sanctimonious because being a moral leader is good. You can't then come around and have this thing kind of be hiding in the background and have it pop up like this. He had an opportunity to address it when he became leader of the party, when he became prime minister. The 4 years that he was prime minister, it's just puzzling to me that he didn't address any of those things yesterday or today.
Well, that he just hoped it would never come out, too.
Two journalists have just published books about Justin Trudeau. One of them, your colleague, Aaron Wary, had lengthy conversations with Justin Trudeau. He could have addressed this issue as part of those conversations and had some control over his message, and that didn't happen. I also think that Justin Trudeau had to know over the past decade that what he had done would get a candidate disqualified for running for a mainstream party, not just the Liberals in this country, that he might not have become Liberal leader with those images. And I suspect that if he is saved from defeat on that basis this time, it's because he has a record as a prime minister, that if this had happened in 2015, he probably would have hit a wall.
Can I play one more clip that struck me? And it was when he talked about his own privilege, because I think that also plays into damaging of the brand or trying to salvage it. He said that word, my producer Ariel counted 9 times. Here's one of those instances.
I have always acknowledged that I come from a place of privilege, but I now need to acknowledge that that comes with a massive blind spot. Wanting to do good and wanting to do better simply isn't good enough, and you need to take responsibility for mistakes that hurt people who thought I was an ally.
What did you make of that? He talked about layers of privilege and
Oh, he mentioned intersectionalities and microaggressions.
Yes.
It plays well with a certain constituency. It sounds like he's being contrite. It sounds like he's making a searching self-examination, and in some ways perhaps he is, but it also gets him off the hook. It's not his own personal failings. It's not his own personal desire to show off or his incuriousness that he never actually figured this out, even at the age of whatever he was, 30 years old. It's just his privilege. He can't be blamed because he comes from a place of privilege. It's an interesting tack. I'm sure they thought it out beforehand. That way it looks like you're addressing it, looks like, and it looks like you're broadening the discussion out, but in a way you're moving it off the focus on your own personal failings.
But it's so interesting because privilege has been one of the things that he's had to sort of push back against, the notion that he's talked about it.
Financial privilege.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of education, in terms of opportunities, but this is about almost like a, white male privilege and a generational privilege, right? But I agree with Andrew. It takes the conversation away from your personal judgment towards a wider discussion that society can have, because a lot of people in society feel like that discussion should be had. And a lot of younger people, frankly, millennials, who he needs to go out and vote for him again, or at least not vote Conservative, not vote NDP. And, they look at this and they think, whoa, who are you? Like, you are not, the Liberals want to make a big deal about Andrew Scheer and LGBTQ rights and anti-abortion comments because millennials will look at that and say, whoa, you don't speak for my generation. Well, dressed in blackface, you certainly don't speak for my generation. You're not acting like someone we thought we knew, and that is really damaging.
So is there a space then where those people can be wooed back or comforted or reassured that this was in the past? And
I mean, look, saying the right words, saying, structural racism and intersectionality and privilege suggests that you know the right words. I think that gets you in the conversation. But I think it's a major failing of us, the media, that we don't ask him what he means when he says those words. Because I'm actually not, at this point, I'm not 100% sure he knows what those words mean. If he knew, then I think he would have talked about this a long time ago. But saying those words as signals to certain, voting segments that he wants to communicate to them that he understands their values, that's useful. I think he needs to be a little bit pushed on whether he understands what privilege.
Though. I mean,
Listen, I don't know that anymore after this episode. I really don't.
Well, I suspect he's going to have opportunities, and I don't mean the leaders' debate with 5 other leaders, if he wants to address it further. I think for now, most voters are going to be thinking long and hard about the explanations that they heard. It's not a small day or a small thing when the photo of your prime minister is the most watched picture around the world. Something happened here. This isn't just a campaign hiccup and we go on in 3 days when the news cycle has done it. We talked about this brand. It's not about restoring the brand, it's managing to go forward with it. But this is not going to go away, even with a victory on the 21st of October.
He has to live with it now.
And if nothing else, it's going to put a severe crimp in the Liberal strategy of attacking their opponents for all their failings. It is particularly galling that they've been doing that over the last several weeks, even as he himself would have known that this was waiting in the background somewhere.
Okay, I'm going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how Justin Trudeau's opponents have responded and whether there's opportunity there. More at issue after that.
How do you respond to somebody? How do you look someone in the eye that's that's mocked the lived reality that I've lived, but more importantly, that so many Canadians have lived. People who have faced injury, both in physical violence and in words, people who haven't been able to get jobs because of the color of their skin, now are waking up to seeing the Prime Minister of this country mock their lived realities.
I believe that Canadians might have been able to accept his apology if he had been truthful and open, if he hadn't based that apology on a lie. So once again, we see with Justin Trudeau one set of rules for himself and one set of rules for the rest of us.
Welcome back to At Issue. Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine all with me tonight. Let's start with, I want to go through a little bit of the reaction, who handled it the best, and whether, how you manage something like this, because you have to use it politically, but realize that there are people too that have been affected by this in a different way. Go ahead, Andrew.
I thought Jagmeet Singh was flawless, and flawless not just in a politically calculating way, but because, and whether there was political calculation involved, I'm sure there was, but he took it to a higher plane. It was looking at some of the moral questions, looking at the reverberations for young children who were looking at this and would be understandably mortified and dismayed by the whole thing and hurt. I thought Andrew Scheer consistently misses the opportunity to take the same sense of gravitas. It doesn't mean you can't, compare and contrast with your opponent, but it just putting the knife in that kind of very overt way, on an issue like this, it didn't look as good.
Well, you expect, I think, a moment of leadership, and it could come from Trudeau as well. He probably tried to do that today again, but it could come from any of them, that you sort of rise above things and talk about it in a different way.
And that's what Jagmeet Singh, I think, delivered. He delivered that moment of saying, okay, this is not really about the circus. We're obsessed with the circus, but there are real people who have to look at those images and they have reactions to those, and they're reactions of hurt and pain because of the history of blackface and brownface. And so he's going to address them first. And I think his speech last night was very moving and very personal, and really didn't come across as some kind of political calculus as much as it was just here's my personal reflection as someone who's lived this reality.
Chantal?
One comment I picked up here or there, which I thought was interesting, and from people who are from visible minorities, and one of them said, the last thing we need are two white politicians having a bidding war over who's the least racist. And I think if I were Andrew Scheer, I would consider that statement very carefully, because that leadership moment he did not provide, and it's getting a bit too late now.
I think Jagmeet Singh, basically, it's his moment to shine. And I would say his first response was the one I was most impressed with, because he was in the middle of a town hall. He had no idea what the reporter was asking him. And his initial response was just, I felt like really perfect. In fact, like, this is how emotionally I feel about what you're telling me. I'm shocked, I'm surprised, I'm disgusted. Also, these are the questions I ask myself, which is a political response about, you know, is the Prime Minister somebody different in public than he is in private? The second time he spoke to reporters, I think was calculating, but that doesn't mean it wasn't authentic, because you really did feel like what the message he wanted to send to young people who felt racist, who have experienced racism, himself included. You could see it in his face. He was tearing up. It was very emotional. But that, I think, was more calculating. So to me, the first response was really like, when you're talking about a moment where a leader shines, he shined.
But just to embroider on that, just because it was calculated doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we talk about the art of being politic, this is politics in some ways at its best, is when you're able to say and do the right thing at the right moment that isn't just a cheap pander, but actually expresses what people's feelings are. And if you make some political gain out of it, well, you've earned it.
But you can cheapen that moment if you keep on trying to repeat it.
Yes.
That's true.
Can the Liberals move past this? Is it too soon for us to conclude how?
It's too soon.
Yeah.
I think people, if people worried about voters not engaged, I think
that's done.
They are now.
We've resolved that problem, but I think it's going to simmer and voters are going to be...
But it's definitely going to remind people of all of the doubts about Justin Trudeau. Maybe that's all priced in. Maybe the people who are already going to be moved by that have already made their minds up, but maybe not.
Or maybe they just don't show up and vote.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Glad to see you all in person. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast. Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, on our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational. And this is how I got Elamine to be here. I promised to plug Party Lines, our new podcast that we co-host. New episodes out every Thursday, so one dropped just today.
And just ahead on The National, working seniors in Canada. Why for many, retirement is coming later and later.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast Front Burner, in light of Justin Trudeau's multiple instances of wearing black and brown face, a discussion about the nature of racism in Canada. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the National Newsroom in Vancouver. Deadly, catastrophic flooding. That's what's happening in southeast Texas right now. And the flooding from Tropical Storm Imelda is being described by some forecasters as worse than Hurricane Harvey 2 years ago. More than 1,000 people had to be rescued. Sections of Interstate 10 have been forced to close. A hospital was evacuated. In some areas, more than a meter of rain has already fallen. Officials say the water might not recede until the weekend. Iran's foreign minister is warning that any U.S. or Saudi military strikes on Iran will result in all-out war.
A military confrontation based on deception is awful. We'll have a lot of casualties, but we won't blink to defend our territory.
Well, those ominous comments on CNN came after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called an attack on Saudi oil installations an act of war. Drones bombed key Saudi Arabia oil facilities on Saturday, disrupting 5% of the daily global oil supply. Yemen's Iranian-backed rebels claimed responsibility, but the U.S. says the weapons were fired from Iran. An American gun manufacturer, Colt, says it's going to suspend the production of its rifles for the civilian market, and that includes the controversial AR-15. Colt says its decision is purely market-driven and doesn't mention any public pressure after AR-15s were used in mass murders in the United States. The company says it will focus on military and police customers. Next on the National, seniors staying in the workforce. Why a growing number of Canadians are pushing back retirement. That story in 2 minutes.
Welcome back. If you've cracked the age of 65 and you're feeling anxious about your retirement, know this, you're not alone. More and more older Canadians are choosing to stay in the workforce or to return to it. Jacqueline Hansen shows us why.
I've got the material to show them.
This is routine for 76-year-old Bill Van Gorder and his wife Esther. Walk.
Oh, we just got a new order in.
And work.
I am certainly not the retiring kind.
So these ones seem to be working okay. They sell Nordic walking poles in Atlantic Canada. It's a passion that pays.
The extra income is not only helpful but necessary. You know, back in 2008 when the market tanked, all I had was our savings, and they were cut about in half.
More Canadians are choosing to keep working rather than retire. Over the past 20 years, the percentage of Canadians 65 and up who are still in the workforce has more than doubled.
Maybe Canadians haven't quite saved enough and they haven't generated enough returns on their savings.
In Canada, the household savings rate has fallen, along with interest rates. Canadians now save less than 2% of their disposable income.
Borrowing costs are so low, so Canadians have this big incentive to go out and borrow. And are they going to really save more in this environment where money is basically free to invest in real estate or renovate homes?
And longer life expectancies mean even bigger nest eggs are needed.
So this is our hub space at Community Innovation Lab. It's a co-working space.
But working later in life has perks beyond the pay.
They have been sitting on these ideas for about 30 to 40 years. So now is a time for them to unleash.
Pramila Ramdani created a pilot program to help so-called seniorpreneurs. Boot camps on marketing, technology, and finding financing. A major challenge she wants the next federal government to tackle.
In the next budget, I would like to see a large funding pool to support senior entrepreneurs.
There's the Havlar Go Safe.
65-year-old Tom Gibson took part in the pilot. He's putting the finishing touches on a portable safe business with his two sons.
I like what you've done with the logo and you make it spin like that.
Gibson also works full-time as a business consultant, and he has a small pension that would be enough to get by without all this work.
But it's not about the money, it's about staying engaged. It's about being creative. It's about working with family and friends to do something that hasn't been done before. If you are concerned about your phone running out of battery, you can plug it in and charge it.
And hopefully lock in an active and financially strong future.
Lock it up.
Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, Canada's National Ballet School's class of 2020 is unlike any other. We'll tell you why in our moment. That's next.
The federal leaders debate is happening October 7th. Do you have a question for the party leaders? Send it in, and it could be asked. Go to cbcnews.ca/debate and submit.
Who is Anne with an E?
Anne with an E. Sunday at 8 on CBC and CBC Gem.
So have a look at that. That line of young dancers represents something historic. The first graduating class from Canada's National Ballet School with more boys than girls. 16 young men, 11 young women for the class of 2020. In its 60th anniversary year, this is a big deal for the school and for the dancers. What it means to them is our moment.
Growing up dancing, I always was like the only boy in the class. But once I came here, it was just like a whole new world. Having so many boys dancing, it's really just a dream come true. Just seeing 16 boys and 11 girls in my graduating class.
People don't generally understand how much passion and perseverance and determination it really takes to become a male ballet dancer.
This is a language for everyone, for little boys, little girls, young men, young women. To have this ratio is deeply, deeply exciting.
From a young age, even just 12 years old, I knew that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
So I did take some dance classes, not at that level, but some dance classes as a child and you know, preteen, and I would have died for that many boys in any of those classes, and there were none.
You know, a reporter who spoke with these young dancers said she found it kind of interesting that the reporter found it kind of interesting that they talked about how much of a haven this is for them because they were, in some cases, so bullied as kids when they were dancing that this means the world.
Yeah, no, I get that. I remember my high school years, and I was like super withdrawn in high school. I wanted nothing more than to not be noticed, you know, to just kind of stay hidden and be the fly on the wall, and anyone with the courage and conviction to do just the opposite, that's pretty cool.
This whole story, of course, reminded me of Billy Elliot, that sweet movie from almost 20 years ago. And I thought, what a cliche, except the artistic director says Billy Elliot has inspired a lot of people, helped a lot of families understand their dancer sons in particular. So I guess it has resonance in the dance community as well. Yeah. That is The National for Thursday, September 19th. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.